Hello, OT friends, and welcome to the Uncommon OT series. I'm Patricia Modis, and I'm your host, a Filipino-American, native New Yorker, currently based in Los Angeles, bulldog mama, and an uncommon occupational therapist myself for the past 22 years. On this podcast, you will hear me proudly feature the unique careers of occupational therapy practitioners working in non-traditional and role-emerging practice areas, settings where OT is uncommon. I invite you to receive a dose of OT inspiration, to learn, to think outside of the box, and to be energized and motivated to follow in these unconventional paths. Happy listening! Before we begin this episode, I want to extend a special thanks to Picmonic, our sponsor. If you are an OT or OTA student looking for an excellent learning resource and study aid, Picmonic might be for you. Whether you're studying for your classes or getting ready for the NBCOT exam, it is a visual mnemonic learning tool that has been research proven to increase retention and help students ace their exams. It uses audio-visual learning and intelligence-based repetition algorithms to help with long-term retention while studying. If you're interested in trying it for yourself, sign up today using the link in the show notes or using the code TRANSITIONSOT to score a discount of 20% off your Picmonic membership. Welcome back, OT friends. Today, my special guest is Jacki D'Aries. Jacki is an occupational therapist and certified brain injury specialist. To tell us more about her uncommon work, I'd like to welcome Jacki to the podcast.
Yay! Hi, everybody. Hi, Patricia. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing what's uncommon about the work that you do. I hope that we have a few listeners out there who fully can relate to what you would be talking about. Right? Meaning that there's a lot of OTs out there who are working in kind of very traditional rehab settings, offering your services just in a different way. So hoping to be able to highlight that. But before we get into, all of that, I'd love for you to, just get us started by telling us a little bit about yourself and maybe some of your favorite occupations.
Sure. And firstly, thank you for doing this podcast. I've been loving listening to everybody's OT journeys, and I love how we're highlighting all of the different areas of OT that are available. Like I said earlier to you, I feel like OT should be everywhere. We could be helping so many people. So I love that you're doing this. And I really do hope that everybody can learn from my experience. I'm only one person in what I'm doing, and I only live in one area, and people can do my type of work anywhere. So I really hope that other OTs who are interested in this follow a little bit in the footsteps and start to become an entrepreneur. But a little bit about myself. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area right now. Some of my occupations that I love doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I do that a few times a week, and I compete a little bit here and there. So that's how I get a lot of my physical energy out. And then I love
Nice.
I love learning to play the ukulele. I take some French classes. My husband is French, so I'm trying to learn to speak the language. And of course, being in the Bay Area, we do a lot of hiking and biking because the weather's just perfect.
Oh, yes. How is it currently? Has it been chillier than normal here in LA? It's been very rainy and not the typical.
Oh yeah, it's very rainy here. It's actually raining right now today. So it's like
Same
a
here.
jigsaw puzzle that I'm just to do today.
Yes. It's just been so much moisture, but it's been wonderful for nature and of course, the concerns for wildfires and such.
Right, exactly.
So thanks for sharing a little bit about you and some of the interesting hobbies that you have. So this might be a good time for you to, just tell us a little bit about your path, a little bit about the work that you're doing, and perhaps, whom you're serving, and some of the goals that you're helping them accomplish.
Sure, I would love to. It might start to help with just a little bit of my background and kind of where I started with OT. I always had an interest in physical rehab. So I started out in a SNF, and then I ended up working my way to inpatient rehab settings. And I had developed a huge passion for the neuro population. So I ended up specializing in brain injury and stroke rehab. And I got my brain injury certification and then worked at an inpatient rehab unit that was solely neuro, and I worked on the brain injury team there. So I ended up really following the path and solidifying my spot with the neuro population.
Hmm.
So as I was working in the inpatient rehab setting on the brain injury team, I stayed in touch with a lot of my clients when they left the hospital and their caregivers, and because I just couldn't say goodbye to them. So
Yeah.
I would stay in touch with them, and I grew so disheartened because they would go home and really lose access to therapy services. In the hospital setting, you get 3 to 4 hours of therapy every single day, and they're making so much progress and they're so motivated. Then they go home and they get maybe home health once a week. And then that, after a month, even with outpatient, that turns into they get it once every 3 weeks and then once
Hmm.
every 2 months. And then eventually they just get dropped off from therapy services entirely. And that can sometimes happen within like a couple of months. So
Yes.
I got really upset to hear that my clients were really, they started to not make as much progress and weren't as motivated. The caregivers then, in turn, were a little bit more stressed out. And with
Hmm.
lack of services, they kind of didn't know where to go and felt really lost. And I know that a lot of doctors say that generally within the first year after a neurological injury is when you'll make your recovery, and then after that, not so much. But I've found the total opposite. And even past a year, even past 5 years, like you can still make progress neurologically, but also with OTs, we can adapt any activity to improve participation,
Yes.
right? So what I ended up doing was I transitioned to going per diem at the hospital, and I started my own private practice in the community to provide extra therapy services for anybody who wanted it. If they were getting home health once a week or outpatient, I was, say, an extra day for them during the week,
Hmm.
or an extra few days if they wanted, right? There's kind of no limit, which I loved about it. If somebody's really motivated and they want therapy every day, I'm like, let's do it. You should get therapy every day if you want it. Uh,
Hmm.
so I I started the private practice, and then also from there, I realized that the private practice also could be a little bit expensive for a lot of people, and I wanted to make sure that I could serve a lot of the population and not just the people who had
Hmm.
money for private practice. So I started my online community through Mighty Networks called the Holistic Life Skills Community. And it's a digital community for people where I have therapy resources and courses. They have access to me as a therapist as well. And it's very, very affordable, like $5 a month. So people can still learn how to progress, have access to exercises and all that, all digitally through their phone or computer.
Nice. I love that um, ability for them to access your services in this alternative way. And thank you for kind of paving a little path for us of, your past experiences and how that contributed to, or how that sort of led you to where you currently are. And yeah, and I think there also probably came a time where you felt that your skills were honed to a certain way or honed enough, I meant to say, and that gave you the confidence to sort of move on to entrepreneurship.
Yes, for sure. I mean, if I, of course, I couldn't have started my practice when I was, 2 years into OT. I really had to learn a lot. And I was so thankful that I worked in the hospital setting and can learn from other OTs. And
Yeah.
I was so motivated to do a lot of research, to be, of course, the best OT that I could be. And all of that time that I spent outside of the hospital researching and learning from others that's what really allowed me to start my practice.
Ah, that's incredible. So I want to learn a little bit more about a typical day or typical goals that you might work on with folks, and that way our listeners can get a little bit of an idea of how you structure your services. How do you sort of do an eval? Are there standardized ones that you use? And I don't know if that means kind of getting into what a typical day might look like, but yeah, you can take it away.
Sure. So typically I offer but my services would be me going to their house to do the evaluation initially. So before I do that, I have usually like a 20 to 30 minute just consult call with anybody who's interested. That way I can just get an idea of who they are, what they're struggling with, so that when I go into the eval, I can come prepared with what they might need. Because I usually use my eval as it is an eval, but I also start treatment, right away.
Mm-hmm.
So right when I go to the home, I'm doing the full home safety evaluation, evaluating, of course, how they're moving around their home. It really kind of depends on their goals, because
Mm-hmm.
since they're out of the hospital, I do have people who range from lower level, right? Like they are still maybe needing help with transfers and eating and ADLs, basic ADLs. But then I have a lot of people who are 6 months, a year out, and they are really focusing on community reintegration and like higher level
Got
life.
it.
So my day could kind of vary depending on that. I sometimes I have some clients that I'll start really early in the morning, get to their house and help them with
Mm-hmm.
bathing and dressing and all that, which is really neat being in their home because I'm sure home health therapists can also agree that we're in their environment, so we don't have to simulate anything. We're just
Yes.
right there. So a lot of home adaptations and helping people around their house. But then the cool thing about my practice is that there are also no limitations to community therapy.
Mm-hmm.
I have the ability to take them in my car and drive them anywhere we want to go in the community. So I have some people that we go to the food store for the first time and I'm teaching them how to fish
Mm-hmm.
again, or we go fly kites in the park if that's their hobby and what they want to get back to doing. We go to farmers markets, the movies, the beach, honestly, anything, like anything that they want to
Mm-hmm.
do. So my day really kind of never looks the same, depending on what we have planned.
I love how occupation centered your interventions are, and just the wide variety, right? It makes for a really interesting day for therapists, right?
Yeah, it's so much fun.
Yeah, and thank you for those examples. Those are my favorite types of interventions too, when you're actually able to go out there into the world and model or help folks just navigate, because it's really challenging for folks. And like you said, the right amount of support is really important, right? So thank you again for sharing a little bit about that. Um, can you, I know you talked about sort of the evaluation process, but do you get your referrals from any specific sources?
Yeah, it's great that we're going to talk about this because when you're starting a business, this is a big aspect of it. And
Mm-hmm.
starting a small business in the community is not easy. You have to have a lot of marketing skills. And when I came into it, and sales skills, and I didn't have any of that when I first started. I just kind of honestly took a leap and of faith and said, you know what? I see a need for these services in the community. I don't even know if it's going to be successful, or not. And I didn't know anything about marketing. We don't really learn some of that in OT school. I had to do a lot of researching on how to kind of manage all of that. But what I ended up doing was reaching out to a lot of hospitals in the area and some community organizations that um,
Mm-hmm.
have people that have brain injuries and strokes that are going to use their services. And I just connected with them, and they were honestly so happy to hear what I was doing because so many of their clients and members asked for the services and there
Got
wasn't any
it.
available. So I get a lot of my referrals from some hospitals and a lot of community organizations as well. I did do like a few kind of farmers market type of tents, where I went and tried to educate
Mm.
people in the community about my services. And that was so much fun. I got to, just teach everybody what OT was. And I help, like, a lot of people in my community also have had a lot of falls and have had some minor brain injuries. So
Hmm.
I got a couple of clients even from that, and I went and did some home safety assessments and assessed their balance and gave them recommendations, balance exercises, and all that. So I got some referrals from that too, which is a fun way.
Oh, I love that. Thanks for those examples. So it sounds like, connecting with your community network, but not only that, but actually being in the community and kind of sharing your work, being able to, tell people about it in person is
Yeah, it's
also
fun.
helpful.
And it felt
Oh,
good, to spread just what occupational therapy is
yeah.
and out. So many people were like, "What is that?" And it's fun to talk about it.
I'm sure you had, little signs and, little kind of, I don't know, buttons and things like
Oh
that.
yeah, brain games. Yeah.
Oh, great. So, how about money matters and payment structures? Do you accept insurance? How do you get paid for your services?
Yeah, great question. So I have my own electronic medical record system that anybody could use. Of course, I have to pay for it. But through there, I can accept insurance. I can accept credit card payments also through there. But because of the private practice, I also have opportunities to be a little bit flexible with some of that. So some people would prefer to pay with a check or cash or Zelle. So I do accept those payment options as well. And then for my online community, that ranges, like I said, it's a sliding scale for people. I just want to make it affordable. So people can pay $5 a month, 10, 15, or 20. And then they get access to everything inside. So once they sign up, they of course put their card information, and then it's just a direct deposit to my account through Stripe. I use Stripe a lot for credit card payments.
Mhm. And you mentioned being able to accept insurance. Is that something that is common in your
So
practice?
so to accept insurance, it's a very complicated process, as you can imagine. So I'm still working on being able to accept insurance right now, but what I can do for people is if they pay for the service, I can provide them with what's called a super bill through my
Hmm.
electronic medical record system. And then after they pay for the insurance, after they pay for the services, I can provide them with the super bill that they submit to insurance. And so
Yes,
some insurances cover the sessions and some don't. Depends on the
got it.
insurance company.
So for your caseload, the majority mostly are paying out of pocket for the
Most of them,
services.
yeah, most of them pay out of pocket. But I would say about half of them submit to insurance for reimbursement, and it's
Oh,
successful. Hmm.
okay, wonderful. Okay, it's really good to hear.
Yeah.
Really good to hear. So, and you mentioned earlier that you sort of started taking was it just one day off, or how is your day typically? Are you still doing per diem work, or are you currently, spending most of your time on your private practice?
That's such a great question, because the transition out of the hospital system was really challenging for me because it's just a big decision. And
Mm-hmm.
so I knew that I just like, and I also didn't know if my business was going to be successful or not, right? Like you're really taking a gamble. And so I didn't want to just completely quit the hospital. So that's why I went per diem, and I was working between 2 to 3 days a week when I first got started with the practice. And then as the practice started to grow, I started to go to once a week and then bi-weekly, and then honestly, like once a month. It started to really pick up quick. Yeah, so within about like probably 6 months, I was full time with my practice. And so now I spend my time, I treat clients every day, Monday through Friday, and sometimes on the weekends too, if I want to.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain events happening on the weekend. But so now my time is split. I treat about, I'd say maybe 4 hours a day, but there's driving included. That's extra from the 4 hours. And then I spend a few hours creating the digital courses to help people progress and inside the
Hmm.
community. Sometimes I host live events inside the community with rehab professionals that I interview and give people an option for question and answer type of thing. So sometimes I have that during the day. And then I also like because I'm an entrepreneur, I can really spend my time, however I want to. So I also work partly, I could do consulting for a local brain injury organization, and I help to develop their programs. So I use my digital courses for the community online community, and I teach the courses in person at the brain injury center. So being an entrepreneur, I kind of like have my feet in all, the different areas because I think I would get bored quick, if I just did one thing. And also, like a lot of therapists really struggle with burnout when
Hmm.
they do so much, which was something that I had a really difficult time with when I worked in the hospital with, so much patient care for 8 hours a day. And I burned out really quickly. So it's nice to be able to have the energy to treat my
Yes.
clients for 4 hours a day and not feel overwhelmed or burned out at all.
Yes, that is such a true statement. So thanks for sharing a little bit about that. And, you know, uh, you, you wear many, many hats. You're a
Yeah.
marketer, you're a content creator,
Yes.
you are, yeah, you're PR, and you're, also the treatment provider.
You know what?
But it's
Sometimes
all,
when I take a step back, I'm like, what am I doing? This is a lot, but I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way.
yeah, as you're talking about, the work that you do, I can't help but notice just the passion. You're smiling when you're talking about it. You're clearly very happy about where you are or where you've been able to take your career thus far.
Yeah, but I wasn't always like that. I went through a really hard time when I was working in the hospital systems with burnout. And so that also was a motivation for me, to start my own practice. It wasn't just to help others because of course that's my main goal, but a lot of it also was to create a better life for myself. And I had to
Yeah.
really dive deep and figure out what my purpose in life is and what are my passions, what are my values, so I did like, the OT work on myself too to figure out how I want to spend my time. And
Hmm.
honestly, since the transition, I have never been happier with my career. And I want that for every OT because what we do is really hard. And we're so passionate about the work. And a lot of the times we put ourselves aside. It's just kind of natural
Hmm.
for us because we want to help others. But so I want every other OT to also experience this feeling, of having a really good work-life balance.
So, do you have, I know you've been sprinkling advice here and there throughout our conversation, but do you have any career advice or any other career advice for anyone who might be interested in getting started on this path?
Yeah, I think that what I would definitely recommend is before you decide to say go out and start your own practice in any field, doesn't even have to be just neuro rehab, if it's mental health, anything
Hmm.
that you start your own practice in, I would definitely say to do some research on, what's available already in the community and kind of really think about the business plan side of it. Like, how am I going to get referrals, right? Because if you don't have any referrals, you won't be successful, right? And so trying to like think about your marketing strategies and the whole overarching business plan before you do it would be important. However, I think that regardless, you have to just go for it because sometimes you don't know if it's going to be successful or not. And you just have to kind of take a leap. And that's what I did. And I'm so grateful and that it was successful. So I think if you can, have your financial means set to be able to take a little bit of a leap, just do it. And you'll learn along the way. You don't have to know everything. I didn't know everything about marketing and social media. That's the hard way. And all of the business type of skills that the electronic medical record system, I learned that all along the way. So
Hmm.
at some point I got to say, just take a leap, follow your passion, and go for it. And if it doesn't work out, you can always fall back, right? On another career path or what you were doing before. Just go for it.
Such great advice. I often tell folks, well, you went to OT school. I think you can handle setting up an LLC.
Yes. A little bit of research, you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, there's lots of supports out there, and I'd love for you to maybe share some of those with us if, or there were any specific ones that you leaned on or found was super helpful in your transition. We can post those on our show notes.
Yeah, sure thing. I'd love to.
So wonderful. What else? So we talked about career advice. Um, are there any common myths or um, misconceptions that you want to share with us about your current role or just about going down this path?
Sure. I think that one comment with it, which I kind of already touched on, but a big myth is that people who are in recovery can't make progress, or not can't, but they generally won't make progress after a year. And that's just total BS. I've just seen people, who are 6 years post-stroke make amazing recoveries, and physically too, like gain more movement, even 6 years post. So that's one myth that I think anybody that's working in neuro should really know about. Like when your client is leaving the hospital, knowing that there's not many community resources available, it's
Hmm.
I feel like the therapist's job in the hospital to say, hey, when you go home, you might not have as much access to therapy services. Don't let that stop you. You need to keep pushing and you can always make progress.
Hmm.
Like that type of motivation and education when they are leaving the
Yeah.
hospital system is really important.
Yes.
So I think that that's a big myth. And then another one that this really isn't a myth, but as I was starting my entrepreneurial journey, and it's always been something that I've struggled with, is I want everybody to know that you're worth it as an OT, especially if you're going into private practice. You have to now do this money management side of things, right? And be asking clients to pay for your services. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of OTs can start to maybe get into the mindset that they want to offer. I mean, of course, you want to offer affordable services, right? But you also need to get paid for your work and know your worth. And so I would definitely suggest diving a little bit into your fears around money. I had to do that a lot initially. And I got to the point now where I feel comfortable, asking for a certain amount of money for my services. But I
Hmm.
would definitely say one thing is just to know that you're worth it and that the services you're providing are very needed. So I think that's
That's
important.
Yeah, and thank you for adding that because that's a common thing I've heard OT say across the board. Just we're not really in the business of charging people. We went into this to help
Mhm.
others, right? And the
Mhm.
insurance piece was always just a part of the job. But as far as financials were concerned, that was as financial as it got, unless, of course, you're doing administrative type of OT work. Because now I'm learning there's so many different hats we wear. But in typically working in the settings where you worked before,
Mhm.
right? So it's definitely great to know that. So,
Yeah.
can you think of any other advice or anything else that you want to add about sort of the financial aspect of things? And, folks are thinking about pricing.
Mhm.
I'm sure those are also difficult decisions to make.
They are. It was again like that sales and marketing business plan aspect of the journey was really challenging for me. So I definitely look, everybody's different, and especially where you live also plays a role with the
Mm,
amount of income that people have. But what I did when I started was that I did offer my services at the beginning for less money than I'm asking for now. Because I'm
Mm-hmm.
just kind of getting it going. So when you first start, you might need to accept a little bit less just to build rapport and start the word of mouth kind of marketing.
Got
Get
it.
reviews for your practice. And then I also trialed to offer a sliding scale with a range for people to pay. So I've trialed a couple of different pay structures, and you might just try a few out and figure out which one works best for you. I found with the private practice that the sliding scale wasn't super effective, but for the community, it has been effective. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just kind of, yeah, trial and error
Yeah.
and yeah, learning along the way.
So it's trial and error on every aspect of the business, right? From marketing to the service offering to the pricing of those services. So
Yeah,
again, thank you for adding these details because
I think they're
these are
important.
really these are the pieces that people agonize over before starting their businesses because it doesn't really, it's not really clear how it rolls out. So
Yeah,
thank you for sharing with us how the process goes in
of course.
your entrepreneur, journey so far. And again, just for this valuable advice, if folks were interested in reaching out, staying in touch, asking you any questions about your journey or anything more specific about the work that you do, would it be okay if they got in touch?
100%. Anybody can reach out to me. I'd be happy to chat about it. They can email me if that would probably be best. So maybe we can provide my email with
We will.
the show notes. Okay, great.
Yes.
And if anybody also has, if they do work in the hospital setting and they have clients who are going home, they can also give them the link to my online community so that the client and the caregiver can, the client or the caregiver can join, and then
Hmm.
they can at least have access to continued services, so that they don't lose progress and lose motivation.
Yeah. So I guess in I want to kind of back up a little because we forgot to to talk about that a little bit more. I know you
Mhm.
mentioned it, but is there anything you want to share about you talked about sort of what the need was that sort of helped you create that way of providing your service in a sort of modified way. Um, but what did you have to, I don't know, take any courses? What was helpful in developing this community? Because I'm seeing a lot of folks doing this online too. And like you mentioned, it was challenging and there was some kind of learning curve. So anything you can share about that?
Sure. I mean, there's definitely a learning curve, as my whole process, right? Everything's a learning curve. When
Mm-mm.
I first uh, purchased the software, of course, I had to learn, right? Like everything about how the software worked. So it took me a long time to like get in there and play with it, and learn how like I wanted to structure the community. And so content creation, learning how to do that is like a whole nother, I'm not super great at it. It's a whole nother, thing that I'm learning. But just for my community, it's really neat inside. There's, like a chat where everybody can ask their questions. There's a whole section for just caregivers and self-care for them. So because that's a whole part of like the person progressing is the
Yes.
caregiver being able to care for themselves. So I also teach caregivers of how to be a therapeutic caregiver. And I have courses on things that they would need to know, like how to progress their loved one at home, how to cue their loved one properly. Like nobody, like
Hmm.
especially when it comes to cognition, caregivers have really no idea when they leave the hospital of how to progress their loved one's cognition at home because it's such a gray area.
Yes.
So I provide courses for the caregivers to also learn how to provide a verbal cue, visual cue, things like that. And self-care for them. Like again, we have little uh sound baths for the caregivers, things like that, which is really nice for them. Yeah, and then
Yeah,
there's
I
all
love
digital
that.
courses on with videos and everything on the Hemi techniques for dressing, all things, how to progress your upper extremity, fall prevention, all things OT for neuro rehab.
Oh, I love that and how you're again creating training specific to this group, right? There's this unmet need there for individuals who just, what is that called when you kind of finish the amount of rehab sessions that you're awarded by the insurance companies, then things terminate, and there you go. That's that.
I say that they get
Um,
ghosted. They get ghosted by
yeah,
the insurance companies.
yeah. So the ghosted ones,
The
right? The
ghosted
ones who
one.
just need more, though, but maybe not too much more, maybe just a little bit more, right? However, there is still that need. So thanks so much for sharing with us how you're addressing this need through your entrepreneurial venture. It is so inspiring to hear, your path and just again the excitement that you have towards the direction that your career is currently going. And I really feel that our listeners will, yeah, that your message and your passion will resonate with a lot of our listeners. So thank you for joining us today.
Good. Thank you so much for having me. I really hope so. I hope if anything, I just hope that people can see, just like with the rest of your guests, like I hope that people could just see that there's another route if they want it, so that they can have a better work-life balance. But yeah, anybody is so welcome to reach out to me, if they have any questions or want to chat. And thank you so much for doing this whole podcast. Podcast work is not easy to do, and you're a woman of many hats too. So
You
thank
got
you.
that right.
Yeah,
However,
for real.
it makes it so pleasurable when I encounter OTs like you. And again, add another OT friend on my contact list. And I just feel like this work has really allowed for me to expand in my network, just learn so much more about the potential of our profession. So it is truly my pleasure. It's been such a wonderful conversation. Again, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much, Patricia. I appreciate it.
And that wraps up another inspiring episode of the Uncommon OT series. Connect with me at www.transitionsot.com. And don't forget to sign up to be part of the Transitions OT community. By doing so, you'll receive my latest compiled list of uncommon OT practice settings, the latest news on mentoring offerings, uncommon OT live events, non-traditional OT resources, and more. You may also follow me on my social media pages on Instagram and LinkedIn. And if you love this episode, head on over to Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, and Google Podcasts to follow, rate, and leave a review. I also ask you to consider pledging your support to my Passion Podcast project by being a patron on Patreon. It is very much appreciated. Sending big OT love. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.